Hello, and welcome to Choices Global, a production of First Assembly of God, Wortmanville, Georgetown, Guyana. On this program, we cultivate and curate conversations pertinent to nation building. Today, our topic will continue from our last segment where we contemplate preparing a child for success. But before we start, we want to offer our prayers for the community, the families, the students and teachers who lost their lives at the Robb Elementary shooting in Texas. Now, for our program, we do have a diverse panel of leaders with us today who are all Guyanese. Dr. Marcel Hudson is the Chief Education Officer within the Ministry of Education of Guyana with over 30 years' experience as an educator. He holds a doctoral degree in transformational leadership, and he is the author of the book Born to Succeed. We have with us Reverend Winston Asana. He has served at Guyana's premier Teachers Training College, the Cyril Potter College of Education, and we call him the educator of educators. He is also the director of the National Youth Ministries Department, a platform for youth leadership and empowerment. And he holds double bachelor's degrees and is currently reading for a master's degree in transformational leadership. We have Miss Anjali Simone Paruag and Miss Melinda Messiah Duncan. They are both educators with over 20 years of experience working in the education sector of both Guyana and the USA. And they both hold Masters of Science degrees in education. Anjali from St. John's University with specialization in special education and concentration in mathematics, while Miss Messiah Duncan holds her specialty in special education and is pursuing an EDH in community care and counseling, marriage, and family therapy. Mr. Martin Messiah is our youth panelist, a regular on our program, and he's a digital marketing consultant with a global footprint. And yours truly, Siobhan Corbin, joining you from Geneva, Switzerland, a proud Guyanese. Welcome, panelists. I hope you're sitting back, relaxed, and let's have a good chat today. Now, in our last program, we started framing the levers of success for a child by looking at the stakeholders in the education process: the parents, the teachers, the students, and the community. Now, in this segment, we want to zero in on helping parents and teachers understand the type of learners that they are supporting. And I really want us panelists to zero in. Yes, we do have our gifted children, and we do need special programs to nurture those giftings. But what about when we have a child who seems to be struggling, and yet it might be a capacity or an ability issue that could be easily fixed? You guys have a wealth of experience. Panelists, any one of you can jump in, but Dr. Hudson, I'm looking to you.
All right. Thanks, Siobhan. I believe that every child is born gifted, and I am quoting Bill Hendricks, who did a terrific book in The Person Called You. He says every child is born gifted. The thing is that some children, their giftedness is pronounced, and so we could see them operating, but it does not negate the fact that every child is born gifted. And for some children, we have to work a little extra to ensure that that giftedness is realized and that their potential is fulfilled. And therefore, we might say, for example, let me give you an example that I've experienced as chief education officer. Sometimes a child might not be performing well in the school system, and some people claim that, well, this child is. Some people use the word dunce, which is ridiculous. No educator should actually say that. But we have discovered, and I've had reports, the moment we put spectacles on the eyes of some children, suddenly they start to excel. The moment they receive an hearing aid, suddenly they start to excel. So, what is fundamental in the process is that there should be a diagnostic around the clock when we are dealing with children as a teacher in the classroom, particularly when they're coming into school for the first time. There should be a diagnostic, and the diagnostic could take the form of a test to see where they're at before we actually start to release a deluge of content on them. But more importantly, before we go to testing and examinations, assessment, or what have you, is this whole idea of screening. And I know there are persons here who are into special education, and they obviously will know the importance of screening. So children receive um, testing of their eyes, testing of the ear, and so on. And we have discovered as we pass some children through the screening process, suddenly teachers said, how come this boy or this girl is doing extremely well? That is in our context in Guyana. I could speak for Guyana. And I have a slight suspicion that sometimes as educators, we pick that up later rather than sooner. But it is better late than never. And so some children will begin to excel. The last thing I want to make mention of here in this whole notion, for example, we say children can't read, they're not reading, and so on. And how many of those who teach reading, how many of those teachers know about the 5 big ideas of reading? And I've discovered that some teachers who claim that children couldn't read, they had no idea about those 5 big ideas of reading. Phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, comprehension, composition, those areas, those big ideas, vocabulary, sorry. And so those big ideas, they are intrinsic in children learning to read. So some teachers don't know, for example, what letter do we get from the sound C? Now C, for example, gives us two songs. What sound, sorry, do we get from the letter C? What sound do we get from letter C? C gives us 2 songs. You have a hard song and a soft song. You have when it is used with a vowel as CA, and then you have. So some teachers don't know that, and so they can't help the children. So when you put C with A now, what song we get from A? You have 2 songs again. You have A and you have A, and then the song you get from T is T. The song you get from T is T. So if you put those songs together with those letters, you end up getting cat. So you replace cat and you put M in front is mat, rat, sat. And so reading is a science. And so if you don't know the science, you will have a difficulty, and we will say that children are slow learners. They are people call them all kinds of names. But the crux of the matter is that we have to know what to do to draw out what is in those children, because as Bill Hendricks rightfully said, every child is born gifted, but we must know what to do. Thank you.
Go right ahead.
Indeed, Dr. Hudson. Dr. Hudson, I agree with you, but I would go right back to the family. I believe it's the parents' duty and obligation to observe their child in the learning environment, in a natural environment, which is the home. If you as a parent understand the milestones of learning and what your child should attain by a certain age, when your child is 2, should your child be making a sound? Should your child be calling a letter? Should your child be walking, talking? If you understand, or if you even have basic content knowledge of milestones, then you'll understand that if your child is not fulfilling this milestone at this point in time, then something is wrong. A red flag is there, right? So from basic observation from the parent, I've known parents who would have observed their children in the home, in elementary school, and the parents would come say, "Oh, Miss Duncan, My child is not my child is not saying the alphabet. My child doesn't know numbers. My child doesn't recognize colors. Then it's okay. And we take it from there, right? And there is where we start the observation process. We start the screening process, not only for hearing and for sight, but we also started so that we can implement individual plans like IEPs. We can implement accommodations and services to equip that child for successful learning. So not only observations, but we also we want the parent to be that first stakeholder. Sometimes parents don't know what to look for, so we're encouraging parents to reach out to educators for resources that are going to help them to take their children to the next level of learning, whatever that might be.
You, Teacher
May I say
Powerful.
Melissa.
something?
I really appreciate that. And I would like to bring two practical experiences I've had in the classroom, backing up both what you have said and what Dr. Hudson said earlier. And then I love the book Dr. Hudson spoke about. I have a copy of it. It's one of my favorites. I pulled two quotes from it just now. But I remember I was sent there to teach, and they had placed me to teach in the third form. I'm not quite sure what grade that is generally right now, but somebody will help me. They asked me to teach this class that they claim was the worst class among the third formers. They were underachieving, they said, and as a result, they felt that they were quote unquote in Guyanese paradigm bad students. I thought it was a challenge, and I went into that classroom. And I guess out of my son, the school background, I started to search for something called giftedness and to highlight and celebrate areas of giftedness. Making a long story short, when my stint was finished with them, they all wrote the same exam across the board in third form. And guess among the top students at that examination were those same students who, it was said earlier, were underachievers. I found it difficult to accept that they were underachievers because it was clear that it was negligence on somebody's part and surely not on the part of the student. I remember another case where a mother came to me and her child was being thrown out of school for underperformance. And she was so overwhelmed by the challenges, finding resources. And now, at this child's age, she was just around 12, 13. And out of the classroom experience, I decided to play the role of a father, ensuring that certain things are done, ensuring that the child got to school, ensuring that assignments were done, ensuring that there is a support structure. And guess what? Out of that simple intervention, the school reversed the decision to expel this child, and that child went on not only to graduate from high school, but went on to university and has acquired a master's degree. It tells me, therefore, that somewhere along the line, backing up both what yourself said, Teacher Melinda, sorry, and Dr. Hudson, that some form of intervention from the home and from the community is necessary. Bill Hendricks, Dr. Hudson, I highlight some of his quotes. He said, giftedness is a marriage between ability and motivation. Somebody must motivate them. Every person is naturally motivated to see some unique, intensely satisfying outcome in their lives. If you tap into that core drive, you unleash the wellspring of their energy as a human being. And I will leave it there for now.
Wow. I think let me jump in here as I give the other panelists an opportunity to reflect. Reverend Asana, you spoke about something here that has been drawing at me outcome. And I find that in the education system, or even as parents, sometimes we measure success by the certificate, by the GPA, And that is not what we expect in the world of work, in the world of producing. So I want to challenge us as a panel and reference a provocative quote that Martin gave. And he said that he came across the idea of someone positing we should raise a child that society wouldn't hate. I think that has now taken us out of the classroom and into the world. What will we measure a child? How will we measure a child that is successful? And building on the education system, which is necessary for socializing, which is necessary for laying the groundwork. What are your thoughts based on that provocative quote? Any of you,
If,
Martin?
if
I
I,
like the thought.
there are three Greek words that sometimes in Luke, and Jesus didn't use the Greek words, but the context, it was there. The context is one of the words is charismatic, which has to do with speaking, proclaiming. And then there's another one which has to do with empowerment, which is the koinonia. And then there's another word, the final word is the one diaconia, where we get the word deacon from, which has to do with service. Now, those three words, they have implications in terms of how we operate. The knowing, doing, and being. So it is not just good enough to have certification, as you were saying, um, Siobhan. You know, but your knowing should impact what you do and ultimately what you will become. So it is the area of the affective, the being is very important. And that is why sometimes we have people who are bright, they have PhDs, but they still make a whole set of mistakes because they have not become. And so I think what we have to do is not only focus on academia and the intellectual aspect of human behavior, but we must also focus on the being. Now, being has implications for love of people, respect, hard work. And so, in the school system, and because we live in a very competitive environment, persons are competing for scholarships, they're competing for places and so on. So there's a heavy focus on the intellect. And sometimes we do that at the expense of behavior. And so I think that any education system that is going to be balanced, and I've been telling this to my people all the time, we have to move beyond knowing and doing and into the realm of being, because when you become, that is when people will respect you for who you are, because they see who you are. You're not just a talker, but your actions are concomitant with your words and who you are. And so I would want to mention that for now to Siobhan.
And I'd like to hear from Angelique because myself and her have had lots of conversations on this on the side. So tell us, what are your reflections on this?
Thank you, Siobhan and panelists. We refer to it as transitional services. At age 12, 13, thereabout, teachers would call the parents, have an interview with the child, and we would call the parent and ask, what would you like to be? What are you thinking? What are your thoughts right now? What are your aspirations? Understanding that two things, they can be trained towards achieving their goal, or they'll change many times before. But having that goal in mind, I want to be a pilot, I want to be an engineer, I want to be, then we write in the steps. How would you get there? By this step, you should be seeking out during your summer vocational clubs, training that would help you assist you in this area. What skills do you need to perfect so that you can attain this level. So when we speak about benchmark, it could be just a line, a notch, appearance to say, okay, well, they should know how to write an application. I will sit my child down and I will ask them 3 questions, and then I'll guide them through the responses. This will help. Now, there is hope for our exceptional learners. In the midst of all of that, if a child can be trained to behave in a particular way, they can be retrained to behave in the other way. All right, so it has a lot to do with training, it has a lot to do with the environment in which they're growing, and of course, are we giving them routines? What are we doing? So I would call a parent and I would ask, what are the hobbies? What are the chores? It's important for the child to have chores. Like that, for instance, sorting the laundry. Every child around 12, 13 should know how to sort the laundry. Putting the whites separate, putting the colors, then they'll come up with reds. Well, if you tell me to put black there and colors there and so what do we do with reds? Okay, so we'll mix the reds with the black. Now you are training your child to be analytical at home. When they get to school, they make those same decisions. Um, I heard, Siobhan, if you can just indulge me a minute here. I heard an announcement this morning where they're retooling teachers. This is particularly in Guyana, retooling teachers in those hard to reach areas where the teachers who cannot come to the city, they are using satellite and internet to train them. And I'm saying fantastic because I've been in those areas and I can see the potential. Those kids are ready and raring to learn. And we have persons who can teach them. So if we have a trainer who's culturally responsive to the environment of that child, that will be the ideal teacher to teach that child. But then they also need to receive the training. So this initiative of retooling the teachers, I think, is an excellent one. So we have training going in, and then we're able to meet using management needs, meet the needs of our kids using strategies that have been worked. Some of them we probably don't even know about because the research, let's say the research is not we don't know the research coming out of the Pomeroon. We don't know the research coming out of Letem as yet. We don't know the research coming out of certain villages in Africa. We just don't know because it just hasn't been done or not yet published. So there is hope across the spectrum of the globe for all of our exceptional learners.
Kudos to Dr. Hudson and his team for those kinds of initiatives. I want us to continue on the measure of success of the knowing, the being, the doing, as Dr. Hudson has coined it. Martin, Melinda, what are your reflections
So
on
Well,
before
this?
Martin, we were making some references to the success of a child. We have what is called, we use what is called an individualized educational plan. It is called an IEP. Each child that different abilities, they are given a plan based on their needs. So we have their goals and we have their objectives. We're talking about the outcome. Martin may have a goal that Martin's goal is to um, be responsible when it comes to his reaction to his peers. But Angelique's goal may be to successfully use a calculator on a non calculator aspect of her mathematical assessment. The goals are different, but they both are working to create a successful individual. Those are some goals that I personally deal with. I have goals where I'm teaching, you would not believe it, 15-year-olds, 16-year-olds. I'm teaching them how to use their bodily functions outside of the classroom and not in a public domain, just there loudly, not in a public domain. But this might not be the goal for another student. So understanding when we write plans, we construct plans, we're constructing the plans based on that individual and their goals, their objectives, and what we hope to achieve, their outcomes at the end of it.
well,
Martin.
something that's interesting is that when we highlight metrics for success when it comes to education,
I generally don't have an education brain. I'm more along the business side. And but I'll share a story. So while I was at Queens College, I heard we got a couple of shout outs in this episode. Um, I had a friend, and this friend of mine never really performed. He was never a top performer, but it wasn't because he wasn't smart. It was because he never had the kind of challenges that he really cared about in class. And based on the traditional methods of measuring academic performance, his performance would have been viewed as maybe mediocre or subpar. But that same student, I knew he was a genius, right? I knew he was a genius, and I knew that he had an advanced level of understanding that the school system might not have been able to accurately measure. And when he went off to university, he graduated as a valedictorian, right? And I think he even received the President's Award or something like that. And what's interesting about this is that when it comes to understanding, your child, sometimes you have to understand not only who they are right now, but who they can become. And you should also understand the kind of propensity that they have for growth. So it's important for you to understand how to measure your child's performance, and don't just benchmark them against their classroom. Sometimes you have to benchmark them against persons who are even in different areas or in different fields in order to truly grasp the strength of the students. And I'll give a business example. You can't really use the same metrics to compare a company that's fast growth. Like Airbnb when it was just launched, or like Netflix when it was just launched, with all these 1,000,001 subscribers coming on board and growing really quickly. If you looked at the growth rate of a company like that and then you compared it against a company like IBM, or maybe even a company like Disney World, you'd say that obviously Netflix is the best company. But of course, some of those companies are blue chip companies, which means that the kind of metrics or the kind of behavior that is akin to those types of businesses would not be akin to businesses that are newer, smaller, and fresher onto the market. So as you evaluate the child's performance, don't just compare them to the student that's sitting right next to them. Don't compare them to the vision that you have in your mind of what this child is going to be. This child is going to become a doctor. All the time you tell the child going to become a doctor, and the child cares nothing about doctoring. Sometimes that child wants to become an engineer. And based on your assessments, that child is a terrible doctor. But a terrible doctor could be an amazing engineer, you know what I mean? So I think that is something that's important for us to consider. And I think that's going to help us to really evaluate the performance and the capacity of the students and the young people that we have.
Martin, I
Martin,
want to come
you
in right
go
here,
ahead, sir.
Martin. Yvonne, would you allow me?
Yeah,
Because
yeah, go
Martin is
ahead.
touching on something that is very dear, and I think somewhere along the line we have been hinting to it. At first, we were suggesting to develop students based on their preference. What Martin has spoken to is developing a student based on their giftings. And I know of someone, for example, who is an ACCA graduate, but upon graduating from ACCA and acquiring the certification, has completely abandoned that field and is doing work in something that seemed to be completely contrary from the training. But that person is extremely excited because they feel that for the first time they were able to discover their giftedness, discover what they have a passion for and what they were created to do. And somewhere along the line, in our education system, in our homes, we must find a way not just to take what the child would like to be, which is good, but we must go a little further than that. What is this child really gifted to do? And upon doing that, you are able to sharpen the point like a pencil. You're able to sharpen the point so that the impact will be greater, and the success is going to be greater. And so, from that same book that Dr. Hudson quoted earlier, Bill Hendricks, there is a need to establish giftedness, because in doing so, you are able to establish success.
I want to share what all of you have said. And I have the story of my own brother, and I want to speak to those parents who may see a child struggling. As a matter of fact, Anjali taught him. And when he was 1 year away from CXC, or if you were in the international community, he was 1 year away from the DCE examinations, he came and told us he wants to drop out of school. And this parent, my mom, to this day I salute her. She told him, "Tell me what you want to do." He didn't want to do mathematics. He didn't want to do English and literature. He wanted to open his own company where he would do welding and fabrication. And at fourth form, he came out, he went to the Technical Institute, and he studied for the same mathematics and all of these things because, as Martin is saying, he's now motivated. And today he owns his own business. And so I want to encourage parents, whether you're sitting in South America, in the Caribbean, in North America, in Africa, you really need to understand, as Reverend Hassan said, the giftings in your child and form them and fashion them. The other thing I want to speak to our parents who might think that they didn't have a university degree and yet they don't know how they will fashion and nurture the giftings in a child. I am the product of someone who didn't finish university, and I work at an international organization. Actually, I've worked at several. And what I have observed is that coming to Switzerland, where, as we would say, you're not competing only with your national peers, but internationally, I have found that many of my success factors are the agility and the adaptability of having been raised with less. And as Anjali said, learning how to be analytical about what you have to do, what you have to do when you don't have much. And those are some of the soft skills that I am able to maneuver around or with that some of my peers who maybe would have been much more focused on education. Was I? Yes. But I had the critical success factor, which was hard times in my family. And so I just want to speak to families who may think you're struggling. Actually, in your struggle, actually, in you trying to figure out solutions, you're actually empowering your children to operate in a world that can change by the day. Martin is a proponent of disruptive companies. And so when you raise a child who is used to challenges, then you see how they will flourish in an environment like I have done. So maybe as we close, 30 seconds to every panelist. What would be your measure of success or your encouragement to a parent or to a teacher looking at this program? Dr. Hudson.
First, I would like to quickly say that we're the ones, I always tell my teachers, we're the ones who have been trained. We went to universities, we have trained teacher certificates, we have masters and so on, and therefore we have to recognize that we are the ones who have the ability and the capacity, and therefore we should not absolve ourselves from being integrally involved in the transformation of the lives of these children. And that is very important. While we call parents alongside, and context is everything. There are some areas where people are impoverished, they're in deep poverty, and therefore it is difficult for them to do anything much than to encourage. And so I would like to say that we need a collaborative approach to improving performance.
Martin.
Okay.
I think that it's incredibly important for us to remember that when it comes to children, don't only think short term. Don't look at what you have immediately in front of you. Always have that kind of growth mindset and believe that they could always be better, you know? And once you have that kind of perspective, you could even look past some of the things that are right in front of you, maybe some of the bad performance that you might be seeing, and you just keep on bringing hope and inspiration and energy. And you never know what could happen, you know? Keep that growth mindset up.
Anjali?
Address your child's health concerns. It's very important that we give them that opportunity. I check, very important, Mount Sinai has a new trial that would really help those who are struggling, and don't take it lightly. Take care of your child. Take them to the doctor. Have them checked. And as Dr. Hudson in his introduction say, let's have this diagnostic done so we know where we start and so we can carry them on.
Melinda?
Mine is, mine is very simple. Continue to observe your children in their natural environment. Listen to your children when they speak. It may be deeper than what they're saying, and continue to support the educator who has the massive impact on your child's future.
Reverend Asana, the last nod to you.
Soft skills are still important. It is more than your certificate. I go back. I believe Bill Hendricks says there is something important you were put here to do, something only you can do. As Steve Jobs he quotes said before he died, your time is limited, so don't waste it. Live it, for someone else is waiting on you. God bless you.
Wow. Well, panelists, this is all the time we have, and I wish we had another 35 minutes. But I will close telling our viewers thank you for watching. Thank you, panelists, for such passionate examples. And I would want to leave with you the way Dr. Hudson reminded us that every child is born gifted. Thank you, our viewers. Please keep in touch with us at faogw.org and our YouTube channel, Choices Global. Join us again on June 19th for another episode. I am Siobhan Corbin, your moderator for today, and I'm wishing you a good day, a good evening, or a good morning, depending on where you're watching us from. This is Choices Global.